Judaism with Soul 23. Teshuvah means expansiveness. Teshuvah does not mean repentance. That's a secular word. Teshuvah means to return to your original self. The root word of teshuvah means lashuv, to return to your original self, to return to your original ideal self, to go back to your potential self and actualize that potential. That is teshuvah. Teshuvah, therefore, means that we return to the ideal self that we chose to be when we were created. Please refer to Judaism with Soul, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, where I discuss the idea that God invites us to come into this world. We agree, and we chose our destiny. We chose the person we wanted to be. That's the ideal self we want to be, the rectified self we want to be, and that's what teshuvah is. We come into this world, we see events, see challenges, and we return to the original self we agreed to be when God invited us to come into this world. That is teshuvah. How do we achieve teshuvah? When we experience challenges in life, we expand expansiveness. We gain in a sense of expansion, expand ourselves to become a bigger person. That is the process of how you achieve teshuvah. Where is there expansiveness in our lives? On Friday night, when we experience an expansion from chol, from the mundane into Shabbos, into the holiness of Shabbos, we expand our consciousness. During the week, we are the masters of our physical world. We're the masters of reaping and plowing and burning. And on Shabbos, we stop doing those things to reflect that God is the master. He's the expansive master of all that act of creativity. And therefore, we stop working, we stop creating, and we give it over to Him as the master creator. We expand our consciousnness that there's a God who created all powers of creativity. And we stop creating ourselves and give it over to Him. That's expansiveness. When we expand from Friday night into the week, we drink wine. Shabbos day, we drink wine. We reflect that idea of the expansive consciousness, the expanded consciousness of self, that we realize there's something bigger than ourselves. We expand our consciousness, we drink wine. Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos, during Havdalah, we pour more wine into the cup that the cup allows to spill over into the week. That the Kedusha, the sanctity, the God consciousness that we achieved on Shabbos spills over. We want it to spill over into the week. That uplift that we achieved on Shabbos, we want it to carry us through into the week and expand our consciousness by being more God conscious during the week because of the uplift we had on Shabbos. So too at Havdalah, at the end of Shabbos, we also drink wine. Expansiveness is accompanied by drinking wine. When we get married under a chuppah, we expand from one person to two people. Therefore, we expand our consciousness of responsibility, and therefore we get bigger, our responsibility grows, and therefore we drink wine. Again, expansiveness brings with it the obligation to drink wine. And so too at a bris, when we expand our consciousness from two people, from a couple, into a family, to mishpacha, and we have a baby boy, we drink wine to reflect the expansiveness, the expansion of responsibility from two people into three people. Why is this? When we drink wine, we get a little happy, we get a little broader, we lack inhibitions, and we get a little bit more relaxed. We expand our version of self. Physically, emotionally, we get more expanded, an expanded version of self. Not to the point of getting drunk, but to the point of just a little greater relaxation of our sense of self by drinking wine. That physical expansion by drinking wine reflects the spiritual expansiveness of Friday night, going from Friday night chol into kodesh. We expand our spiritual consciousness from regular to Shabbos. We expand Saturday night into carrying over the Kedusha into the week. We expand from a couple from a single person under a chuppah to two people. We expand. And we expand from two people at a bris into three people. We expand our sense of consciousness and responsibility. And therefore, the physical expansion of self when we drink wine is able to contain the spiritual expansiveness of becoming a more consciously expanded version of ourselves. So the physical expansion reflects and contains the spiritual expansion of self at these special times. So in the Gemara, we have a very beautiful, poignant idea of how we can expand not only our responsibility, but expand ourselves as well. The Gemara in Sukkah, Daf 7a, Zayin Amud Aleph, says that when we describe how to build a sukkah and the measurements of a sukkah, we have a measurement called a tefach. A tefach is about this big, about 3.5, 4 inches in width. There are two measurements, says the Gemara. A tefach atzuv, when there is a clenched sense of fingers, where the fingers are tight together. That's a tefach atzuv, a sad tefach. And there's a tefach seichik, a broader one, an expanded version of tefach, called a happy tefach. So this is a tefach atzuv, and this is a tefach seichik. So this is 3.5 inches, a tefach atzuv, and about 4.5 inches is a tefach seichik. The question is asked by my Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapira, Zecher Tzadok Livracha, why don't these two measures of tefach, why aren't they referred to by two different names? This should be called the tefach, and this should be called the revach. Why use tefach atzuv and tefach seichik? So the Gemara is teaching us an important lesson according to Rav Moshe. He says that when we experience life as a tefach atzuv, sad events, challenging events, our job is to expand our consciousness into a tefach seichik. We take the tefach atzuv, the challenge, and we learn a lesson from it. We grow from it. We expand our sense of self from tefach atzuv to tefach seichik. Therefore, it must be the same name. A tefach, which is a challenge, a tefach atzuv, where we become sad because we're challenged by something. From that challenge, it's not meant to break us. It's meant to make us bigger. It's meant to expand our consciousness, to become a better person, to learn something from it. Everything that happens in our lives is meant to learn something, to grow from it. And that's the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to grow from our experiences, not to be broken by them. Even though they're challenging, and even though things are difficult for us, we have to think, what can I learn from this experience? How can I grow from it? How can I grow from a tefach atzuv to an expanded version of tefach seichik, to a happy tefach? And the inyan of simcha, joy, means when I go from this level of self to this level of self, when I go from a restricted, tzimtzum, contracted version of self, to a hispashtus, an expanded version of self. And that's what happens. Tzimtzum means constricted, narrow, an old version of self. Hispashtus is an openness, an expanded version of self, a bigger version of self. That transformation from tefach atzuv to tefach seichik, from tzimtzum to hispashtus, that gives forth to an inner contentment and joy. Why? Because I'm achieving my purpose in life. My purpose in life is to grow, to expand, to do teshuvah. Teshuvah is not a bidi eved. Teshuvah is a lechatchila. Teshuvah is not something we do only when we make a mistake. Teshuvah is something we do all the time. I always want to expand. Why? The reason why we are in this world is to become like God, lehis damos lekono, to become dome lo, laleches bidrachav alachta bidrachav, to be like God, to walk in His ways. That's why we're here. God is being, so to speak. His essence is Ein Sof, unfathomable. He is infinite. He's unknowing. He's never ending. Ein Sof. How do we become like God in a certain way to be Ein Sof? When we grow, when we expand ourselves from one version of self to a higher version of self, to a broader version of self, we also have a little taste of becoming a little like the Ein Sof. We also expand somewhat. We also become a little bit more infinite, a little bit more broad, a little bit bigger than ourselves. And therefore, that's the way we emulate God. God is Ein Sof. When we grow, we do teshuvah, we also become have a taste of the Ein Sof by also growing in experience. That growth gives rise to simcha. That is the true essence of life. Real simcha, real joy, inner joy, is when we expand from one version of self to the other. So if I am apt to raise my voice with my family, in my home, and I say to myself, I'm going to become bigger this year. I'm going to become a bigger version of myself. I'm going to keep quiet. I'm going to speak from a level 1 voice. There are 3 levels of voice. Level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is the intimate, kind, warm, sensitive voice. Level 2 is the level voice of conversation. Please pass the ketchup. Level 3 is, don't you run on the road. That's level 3. Many of us live on level 3, or level 2 at least. But we have to expand our consciousness to speak with our families and our spouses on level 1, the level of intimacy. When I was going to criticize my spouse, and I hold myself back, and I become a greater version of myself by saying I have self-control, then I become a greater version of myself. That elicits within myself a sense of accomplishment, a sense of inner contentment and joy. That's real simcha. when I say to myself, I'm not going to be angry anymore. I'm going to be more positive with my life. I'm going to rise from negativity and tzimtzum and narrowness to an expanded version of positivity, of hope, of positive thinking, positive words. If I was going to speak Lashon Hara and judge other people, instead I'm going to stop speaking Lashon Hara and start speaking Lashon Tov. Lashon Hara is blocked, is overcome through Lashon Tov. Not only by refraining from speaking negative, but by speaking positive, to expand my version of self from negativity to positivity. That growth from tzimtzum to positivity, that is called expansiveness. That is called becoming a little bit more Ein Sof. I expand myself to become a bigger person, and that's how I do tshuva, to return to my higher self. And that gives rise to an inner simcha, that there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that geschmack of accomplishment, of growing to become a better person.